The sound that started it all wasn't her voice. It was the crack of a glass hitting marble. "What did you do?" Lydia's scream burst through my phone, sharp and frantic, followed by the clatter of plates and startled chatter in the background. On the screen, I saw sunlight spilling over a Roman cafe terrace, white umbrellas, gold-rimmed glasses, the blur of expensive laughter. My daughter's face filled the frame, red and trembling. They froze everything. Mom, every account, Evan's, mine. "Even the joint card, you ruined us," she was shouting now, breathless, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "I hate you" behind her. Evan was arguing with a waiter, waving his phone, and there she was, to Marcia, his mother, draped in silk and smugness, muttering something Lydia didn't want me to hear. I sat perfectly still at my kitchen table in Charleston, my chipped porcelain cup balanced between both hands. The ceiling fan rattled softly above me. It was humid enough that the wallpaper curled at the corners, and somewhere outside, a mourning dove cooed, slow and hollow. For a long moment, I just watched her. The panic, the privilege, the child I'd raised now unrecognizable through a stranger's fury. My daughter had my dark eyes, but none of their patience. "Mom, answer me," she yelled, her voice breaking. I set the cup down carefully, the sound of porcelain against wood, small and final. "Take a breath, Lydia." Her expression froze. Then the connection cut. Silence. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant siren of a passing boat on the harbor. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the past 3 days press against my chest. Because 3 days earlier, I had stared at my bank app and seen a number I never imagined possible: zero. $94,000 gone, every penny wired under her name, my daughter's name. That morning, I didn't scream. I didn't beg the bank for help. I brewed another cup of coffee, sat right where I am now, and whispered to the empty room. "All right then, let's begin." The grocery bags were still on the counter when I sat down with my phone. I'd just spent $27.14 milk, bread, instant coffee, and a bag of apples. I opened my banking app to make sure the charge had gone through. Then I saw it. Available balance $0. At first, I thought it was a glitch. I refreshed the page once, twice. The number didn't move. The color of the text red seemed to bleed across the screen. My throat tightened. I called the bank. The voice on the line was bright, rehearsed. "Yes, Mrs. Hayes. I see the recent activity here. There were several online transfers over the past 3 days. How much I managed to ask, totaling $94,000. Ma'am." I pressed the phone to my ear. "To whom?" A brief pause. The sound of keys clicking, an account under the name Lydia Harper. My daughter's married name. The world shrank to a pinpoint. I remember saying thank you. Then I hung up and sat very still. The phone still in my hand. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. The receipt from the grocery store fluttered to the floor. I stared at the screen again, as if maybe this time it would fix itself. But the zero stayed, cold, final. A memory slipped in without warning Lydia at 10 years old, standing barefoot on the porch, holding the lunch I'd packed for her. "Don't work too late." "Mom," she'd said. I'd smiled. Though my hands were blistered from mending uniforms all day, I remembered skipping dinners, sewing until dawn, selling my father's antique tools just to cover her tuition. Every sacrifice had her name on it. Every dream I'd let go was supposed to make her life easier. And now my name, my savings, my life, all of it, belonged to her again. My fingers trembled. Not from age, but from something far heavier. I closed the banking app and sat back. The house felt too quiet, too clean, like it was waiting for me to understand something terrible that I wasn't ready to see. The next morning, Sunlight crept across my kitchen floor like nothing had changed. I moved through the motions, boiled water, fed the cat, folded yesterday's dish towel pretending the world was still steady. But my phone buzzed on the counter, and one message shattered the illusion. It was from Nora, my neighbor of 20 years. Look at Lydia's Instagram. I opened the link without thinking. There she was, my daughter standing in front of the Trevi fountain in a white sundress, her hair shining under the Roman sun. Beside her, Evan in linen, smiling with a champagne flute raised high, and just behind them, framed perfectly in the photo, sat Marcia, his mother, draped in designer scarves and satisfaction. The caption read, "New chapter. We deserve this life." I scrolled through the comments, one by one. Couple goals. So happy for you both. Cheers to success. A dozen clinking glass emojis glittered under her name. The photo had thousands of likes. My thumb hovered above the screen, tracing her smile. That same smile I'd once seen when she was 6 years old, running barefoot through the backyard, holding a lemonade cup like treasure. I used to tell her that joy didn't come from money. She used to believe me. The phone's cracked corner reflected my face back at me, a faint, distorted image. My expression barely moved, but something behind my ribs shifted, heavy and final. Nora texted again. Is she okay? Did she tell you she was leaving? I didn't answer. I put the phone down and stared at the sink, where the faucet still dripped in slow, stubborn intervals. Somewhere between the ticking and the dripping, the house seemed to hold its breath. Outside, children's laughter floated from down the street, bright and distant. I thought of how far Rome was, how far my daughter had traveled to toast with the money that once kept the lights on in this house. The air in the kitchen felt colder than it should have been. I looked back at the phone screen, at her smiling face frozen mid-celebration, and whispered quietly, almost tenderly, "You deserve what's coming." By the time dusk settled over Charleston, the house had gone still, the kind of stillness that makes every sound deliberate, the whistle of the kettle, the creak of a chair, the slow breath between thoughts. I poured hot water into my chipped floral mug and carried it to the back room, where my old sewing table waited by the window. Threads of every color hung from the edge, tangled like unspoken memories. The notebook was still there too, its cover faded, pages soft from years of fingerprints and fabric dust. It used to hold sketches, client measurements, little notes like Mrs. Deaton owes $14. Tonight, I opened it to a blank page. The pen hesitated, trembling between my fingers. Then I wrote one line. Small but steady. This is not the end. This is accounting. The words looked strange in my handwriting, firmer than I expected. I stared at them until the letters began to anchor me. The smell of chamomile filled the room, mixing with the faint scent of old fabric and starch. My mind drifted back to a softer time, Lydia at 9 years old, sitting cross-legged on the floor, holding pins in her mouth as she handed me fabric scraps. "When I'm rich," she'd said through a mouthful of pins, grinning, "I'll buy you a real studio, Mom, with bright lights and big scissors that don't stick." I'd laughed, smoothing her hair. "You just keep your fingers safe first." That was years before she learned the difference between promises and purchases. The memory faded, leaving only the hum of the night through the open window. I turned to a fresh page and began to list everything Lydia had ever signed in my name insurance forms, bank documents, even the old rental papers from when she and Evan needed a cosigner. I wrote slowly, carefully, the way I used to measure fabric straight lines. No waste. Outside, the crickets began their nightly chorus. Inside, my pen kept moving. I wasn't sewing anymore. I was stitching something else, quiet, precise, irreversible. The cemetery sat on a small hill overlooking the harbor. where the wind carried the scent of salt and magnolia. I hadn't been there in months, but that morning I felt pulled to it as if my late husband, David, was waiting for me to finally admit he'd been right. The grass was damp beneath my shoes. His headstone was simple, just his name and the words, "Always steady." I knelt beside it, brushing away a fallen leaf. "You told me once not to make Lydia my retirement plan," I whispered. "I thought you were being cynical. Turns out, you were just trying to save me." The wind lifted my hair as if in answer. For a moment, I could almost hear his voice, calm, practical. The way he used to sound when he balanced the checkbook at the kitchen table. He'd always said I trusted too easily. Maybe I did. By the time I got home, the dizziness hit again. It wasn't new, but it came stronger this time, a wave that blurred the edges of the hallway. I leaned on the wall until it passed. Later, when I rolled up my sleeve to fold laundry, I noticed another bruise on my arm, dark, round, with no clear reason. I rubbed it once, then pulled my sleeve back down. There was too much to do to start worrying about my body. That afternoon, I walked to the small credit union on Calhoun Street. Mr. Keenan, my old landlord, worked there now, graying at the temples but still kind behind his thick glasses. He smiled when he saw me. "Corinne Hayes," he said. "Haven't seen you in ages. What brings you here?" "I need to ask about joint accounts," I replied, sliding my ID across the counter. "If someone added my name or used it, how would I know?" He studied his monitor for a long moment, then frowned. "These transfers look irregular, and this signature, see the loop here. It's not your handwriting, Corinne." The screen glowed between us, bright and undeniable. I straightened my back. My pulse didn't race this time. The shaking was gone. It wasn't fear anymore. It was calculation. 2 days after my visit to the credit union, I knocked on Martha Lynn's door. She lived across the street, a retired accountant with sharp eyes and a voice that could cut through fog. Her porch always smelled of lemon polish and old paper. She looked surprised to see me holding a folder. "Corinne Hayes," she said, folding her reading glasses. "You look like someone carrying more than bills." I handed her the folder without a word. Inside were printed statements, withdrawal notices, and the faint copy of the forged signature Mr. Keenan had shown me. She flipped through the pages quickly, her eyebrows lifting higher with every sheet. "Whoever did this knew what they were doing," she murmured. "These are deliberate transfers structured to avoid flags. And see here, the dates line up with your daughter's overseas payments." The words "your daughter" landed like stones. But I didn't flinch. "Can you help me trace them?" Martha nodded. "If you've got the patience for paperwork, I've got the time." That afternoon became the first of many. We sat at her kitchen table, laptops open, the hum of her old printer filling the air. Bit by bit, the pattern took shape, wires routed through small accounts, travel agency payments, and one alarming discovery, an online attempt to register my house under Lydia and Evan Harper's names. The document had failed only because one field, my birth date, had been entered incorrectly. Martha exhaled slowly. "If that had gone through, they'd already own your house." I didn't speak. I just wrote it down in the red notebook. Over the next week, I visited the bank, the county office, and the notary. I made copies, requested timestamps, filed forms. My handwriting grew steadier with each signature. Martha taught me how to submit an elder financial exploitation report to the State Bureau. She smiled as we sealed the envelope. "Most people your age would cry or give up," she said. I smiled back faintly. Most people never raised a child who could steal from them. By the time the sun set that evening, my kitchen table was covered in labeled folders. The chaos was gone, replaced by order, my kind of quiet justice. The call came on a Wednesday morning. Just as I was labeling the last of my folders, the number on the screen belonged to Dr. Mendez, my longtime physician. His voice was careful. Too careful. The way people speak when they're about to take something from you. Corinne, I got your lab results. I'd prefer you come in, but, well, I think you should hear this sooner rather than later. I sat down. The phone balanced against my shoulder. Go ahead, doctor. He hesitated. It's leukemia. Early stage, but not newly developed. We likely caught it later than ideal. I stared at the stack of papers on my table, bank records. Notarized copies. The red notebook I'd begun to fill with tidy handwriting. It looked like a stranger's desk. What's the treatment, I asked. Chemotherapy? Of course, it's aggressive, expensive, and hard on the immune system. You'd need help at home. We'll explore options. His voice softened, breaking slightly around the edges. I'm sorry, Corinne. I smiled, though he couldn't see it. Don't be. I've lived long enough to know everything costs something. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet for a long time. The clock on the wall ticked without mercy. Through the window, the afternoon light pooled gold across the floorboards. Dust drifted like slow snow. I didn't cry. Grief, by then, felt like a worn-out garment I'd already outgrown. I made tea, sweetened it out of habit, and carried it to my sewing table. Then I opened the new red notebook, the one Martha had bought me when the old one filled up, and wrote on the first page, in firm, deliberate letters, Justice Log Day 1. Underneath, I drew a line and wrote the date. Somewhere deep inside, a new calm settled in, heavier than sorrow, steadier than fear. It wasn't denial. It was focus. The kind of focus that comes when you finally understand how little time you have and how much of it you still intend to use. The morning I filed the final report, the air smelled like rain. I walked into the downtown branch of the bank with my papers tucked neatly under one arm. Every line was signed, every page stamped. The clerk, a young man with tired eyes, read through the complaint, then looked up. Elder financial exploitation. He said softly, That's serious. I nodded. So was what they did. He scanned the documents again, then typed something into his computer. Once we submit this, the system will flag the connected accounts. It may take 48 hours. Take your time, I said, though I already knew it wouldn't. That afternoon, I sent 3 emails to the fraud department, the insurance adjuster, and the State Bureau, each one calm, factual, almost gentle. Precision had replaced anger. I no longer needed to raise my voice. The paper trail spoke fluently enough. By nightfall, Charleston thundered. Rain hit the window pane in rhythmic bursts, and the city lights flickered on like small witnesses. Somewhere across the ocean, another kind of storm was about to begin. In Rome, at a restaurant overlooking the Tiber, Lydia handed her credit card to the waiter. He swiped once, frowned, and tried again. The machine beeped, declined. He said. Lydia blinked, laughing nervously. That's impossible. Try again. Another beep, then silence. Evan leaned over, whispering, Maybe the chip's dirty. But when he checked his phone, his smile vanished. At the next table, Marcia lowered her wine glass. What's going on? They froze the accounts, Evan muttered. Every one of them. Marcia's voice rose, sharp as glass. Your mother ruined everything. Lydia's phone vibrated in her hand, a notification from the bank. She read it once, then again, her pulse visible in her neck. All assets under investigation, elder abuse hold activated. She stared at the screen until her reflection blurred behind the message. And across the ocean, in a quiet Charleston kitchen. I sat by the window with a cup of tea and whispered into the rain. She thought I'd never understand online banking. I smiled faintly. I taught her to count. The marble floors of the U.S. Embassy gleamed under the fluorescent lights. each step echoing like a gavel. I had flown in 2 days earlier with a single suitcase and a folder of documents, guided by Mr. Keenan's former colleague in the legal department, a man named Alan Mercer, who owed him an old favor. He'd arranged for me to attend the appointment as a witness of record. Outside, Rome shimmered under a ruthless sun. Inside, the air was cold enough to sting. When Lydia and Evan entered, they looked nothing like the glamorous couple from the Trevi fountain photo. Their clothes were wrinkled, their eyes swollen from sleepless nights. Lydia froze when she saw me sitting at the end of the table. "Mom," she whispered, disbelief and fury mixing in her voice. Alan gestured for them to sit. "These documents officially remove your access to Mrs. Hayes's accounts and assets. You'll need to sign before we can close the investigation." Lydia slammed the pen on the table. "You ruined me," her voice cracked, echoing against the white walls. I leaned forward, my voice calm, steady. "No, darling, I stopped you from ruining me." Evan shifted beside her, eyes darting toward the door. Marcia was absent, too humiliated, perhaps, to show up. Lydia's hand trembled as she signed, the ink bleeding slightly onto the paper. Alan collected the forms, nodded, and stood to leave. But before he did, a soft click drew our attention. A tourist, standing near the waiting area, had been recording. He lowered his phone awkwardly, whispering, "Sorry, I didn't mean to." But the moment was already captured. The quiet mother, the fallen daughter, the final reckoning. By that evening, the video was online. Within hours, it spread under one caption, "The Silent Mother." When I left the embassy, the city lights reflected on the Tiber like molten gold. I didn't feel victorious, just clean, like the world had been rinsed of something heavy. I walked without hurry, the red notebook tucked against my chest, and for the first time in years, the silence felt like peace. Charleston's winter came softly that year. The air carried salt from the harbor, and the light fell pale across my living room floor. My body had grown weaker, the bruises darker, but my mind had never felt sharper. Every drawer was in order, every folder labeled. Justice had been served not loudly, not cruelly, but completely. Some mornings, Martha would stop by with biscuits or fresh oranges. She never asked about Lydia, and I never offered. We had settled into a quiet rhythm, two women who understood that silence could be its own language. The doctor called once more, suggesting treatment. But I declined. "I've already begun mine," I said. "It's working." Months passed. One Sunday, I noticed a bouquet of lilies on my porch white, trembling in the breeze. There was no note, but I recognized the handwriting on the florist's paper, Lydia's. She came again the following week, and the one after that. Sometimes roses, sometimes daisies, always silent. I never opened the door. I watched from behind the curtain as she stood there a few minutes longer each time, shoulders smaller, eyes lowered. I didn't hate her anymore. The part of me that once burned for revenge had cooled into something cleaner, an understanding that love, like trust, cannot be demanded back once it's broken. That evening, I sat by the window in my rocking chair, the red notebook open on my lap. My handwriting was weaker now, uneven, but my words felt steady. Love is not owed. It's offered, if she ever learns that. I've done my work. I set down the pen, closed the notebook, and let the sunlight slide across its red cover. Outside, the wind brushed against the porch, lifting one of the lilies Lydia had left. It tumbled softly onto the step below, landing upright as if refusing to fall. The chair creaked gently beneath me, keeping time with the tide. For once, everything was still.